Brenda Stewart has had pencil and paintbrush in hand since early childhood. Though her background is in fine art, she is best known for her work in the field of decorative painting. She has taught her techniques for 20 years, locally and at seminars and conventions throughout the United States and Canada. Her books and instruction packets have brought her methods into the homes of thousands of painters. In 1985, Brenda and her husband Robert moved into a restored 1856 Acadian home and opened a seminar teaching facility and retail shop on the grounds. Here, a full complement of classes are offered by Brenda and the staff teachers, and a flourishing mail-order business occupies other members of the staff. Although Brenda has made variety of subject matter a goal of her seminars and publications, she has developed specialties. Her portraits have won the hearts of painters everywhere, and the small roses that adorn many of her pieces have almost become a signature. In this video, Brenda will guide you through the construction of the face, hair, and clothing with step-by-step instruction. Seemingly difficult areas, such as eyes, noses, and mouths, become magically simple. You will learn to capture the fragile and ethereal beauty of Brenda Stewart's paintings and experience the thrill and satisfaction of expressing yourself through painting beautiful portraits.
Hello. Thank you for allowing me to join you today via video. Together we will paint the Victorian portrait on the tall bonnet cabinet behind me. Then we will work on the small roses that trim the other surfaces of the piece. If you've never painted faces before, you may feel that they are very difficult. You will soon see that they are easily accomplished when broken down into a series of small steps. Whatever I'm painting on right now is always my favorite subject matter, but portraits are very dear to me. Nothing gives more pleasure than creating a new face with new expression and a different personality. Even if you paint faces in class, with instruction, or from a book and packet, your face will still be unique with its own distinct personality. I think you'll enjoy this as much as I do. Let's get started. First, we will touch on supplies. The printed instructions in your video discuss supplies at length. I hope you will take time to read them carefully before painting. We will begin the painting today in alkyds. Later in the video, I will touch on how this project is done in acrylics. Briefly, alkyds are a paint that is similar to oils. They may be used with the same solvents, brushes, mediums, and even techniques, but they dry in a matter of hours rather than days or even weeks. They are also compatible with oils and may be mixed with oil paints. The colors that we are using today are titanium white, Naples yellow hue, cadmium yellow light, raw sienna, alizarin crimson, burnt umber, and phthalo blue. We will be working with Winsor & Newton blending and glazing medium, not mixed with the paints, but rather dressing the surface before we paint. The paints will then be dry brushed on the project. Prior to working with oils or alkyds, I apply a little bit of Art Guard, which is a barrier cream, to my hands. This enables paint to be removed easily and protects you from the pigments entering your skin if your skin is chapped or if you have cracks in your skin. Art Gel is what I use to clean the brushes. It also removes paint from clothing. The brushes that we use today are red sable brushes. They are Winsor & Newton brushes. I work with angles for the most part. This is the 760 series, and you might need everything from 1/8 inch to a 1/2 inch. You might prefer working with the 710 series. I have one 710 laying next to the 760s. These are brights or short-haired flats. I will work with this one when I'm painting the roses. Then we'll work with rounds. This is the 720 series, which is a small round with a very good point. You may prefer working with a little bit longer brush, a round that becomes more of a liner. This is the 740 series. You will also need a couple of small mops, a mini mop, and a detail mop. On this palette, you see the color mixtures that are listed in your printed instructions. On the top row are the straight tube colors. Then we have the 2 pre-mixes that are listed, and then the 8 color mixtures. I have pulled out the dark colors with a little terp in the brush so that you can see the hue of the color. On the demonstration piece, I have outlined the pattern a little bit so that you can see it more easily, and I've also applied 1 base coat to the face and to the blouse to speed us up just a little bit. Choose a brush that you really don't like to paint with very much and use that for applying your blending and glazing medium. Dip it in the medium and blot the brush on your paper towel and then dress the surface. You want the feeling of having to stretch the medium just a little bit with no puddles and just enough to have a slight glisten when you turn the piece in the light. I've dressed the face and I'm going to apply now with a dry brush another coat of the number 1 mixture. 1 coat, remember, has already been applied just to speed us up a little bit. So I'm going to apply another coat, stretching the paint, dry brushing the paint. It's important to keep the paint dry brush. That's why you want a separate brush for working the medium. We'll just stretch this on here. We want good color, but not enough to make ridges or a texture on the surface. I'm going right over my pattern lines because I had lined those in an acrylic. If you only have a graphite line on your surface, you'll have to be very careful and work around the graphite lines because everything you're working with will erase those lines. So frequently I will lightly line the pattern in acrylics before beginning with an oil or an alkyd piece. Okay, there's a good base coat on the face. Now I'll just wipe the brush. I'll not dip into terp very often. Go into the second color and side load the brush. Pull out a little bit of color and blend it into the brush. Blend both sides of the brush. You will be doing some blending on the face, but if you side load the color and take a little bit of time on your palette, your work will be made easier on the surface. Okay, now we'll come to the face and we'll start with the larger, more obvious shadows. We'll start up along her hairline. I'm going to use the angle brush, lay in a soft shadow around the hairline. I'm going to come on down the left side of her face, in front of her ear, and continue a soft shadow on down the jaw, which will curve and become the point of what is actually an elongated triangle and fade away. Now we'll come back to this side and continue the shadow to the other side of the face, and rather than ending bluntly like this, when you reach the edge of her forehead there, curve that line back. We'll be talking about curving angles and losing angles all day today while we paint the face. Okay, I'll wipe the brush, and because I'm painting in alkyds, I will immediately blend that shadow. You do a little more blending as you go with alkyds because they may set up a little more quickly than oils. You see that there's very little blending to be done because the side loading had been done on the palette. The way that we blend is to stroke parallel to the color break, the line between two colors. If you need to move a color out farther, you'll walk it out like this. If you need to push it back, you would walk it back. On the first blending, you will rarely pull from a color out. Okay, so that's blended. Let's blend it on the back side of this jaw also a little bit. And then we'll load and set in another. Remember to spend a little bit of time blending on your palette. Let's get another easy one. We'll come under her chin right here. Lean up on the corner of the brush a bit because that's a narrow area. Come right on up her jawline, and the jawline cuts over the lobe of the ear. Then come back and come under the lobe of the ear. We'll wipe the brush and blend that one just a bit. Very soft shadows to begin with. We build the values in our faces very gradually. All right, while we're there by the ear, let's pull this hairline shadow over the top of the ear. You aren't seeing the entire ear. You're going to pull her hair over it, soften that. And then with the same brush, or if you'd like to switch to one a little bit smaller, if you're more comfortable with it, you may. This is a 1/2 inch brush. Come in and begin to hint at the inner dark opening in the ear. Wipe the brush and soften that. That will become more defined a little bit later. Now let's come back to the neck again. We'll get a little tiny bit of a curved triangle right off the back edge of her neck. We don't see much of that. And then drop a little shadow that's just going to make this part of the neck, as it gets narrower, all dark. Kind of touch it down in between those ruffles. Blend that a bit. Almost solid dark up in this area. Next, we'll begin to construct the area around the eyes. We'll load the same mixture, number 2, into the brush, but a little heavier so that the color's going to look a little darker. We'll come in and begin in this long shadow that we have already placed down the side of her face, and we'll come up around the eye and curve from that shadow to the eye, beginning to construct the temple. Then we'll reverse the brush. The color is always in the point of my brush. Come under the eye and pull out, and that gives us the upper curve of the cheekbone. Wipe the brush, blend the outer edges of this shadow, and blend this back portion until it just disappears into the softer shadow that we previously applied to the face. Then we'll come to the inner corner of the eye, and we'll also begin constructing the eye socket there. This is the more open side of the face. When a face is turned to one side or the other, we have a side that's more closed and a more open side. So this area is not as definite and sometimes is a little more difficult to construct on this side of the face, the open side. We'll work right here against the inner corner of the eye. We'll push this color. We will take the lower side of it, pull toward the nose. You can see that nose a little more clearly, and later you will be able to. You see that that leads the eye in toward the ball of the nose, not the outer side of the nose. Then the upper side, we'll pull upward gently toward the brow, just lifting the brush and letting it fade. We'll wipe our brush, come back and blend the soft edges of this shadow. This one will grow a little bit later on. While you don't have much paint in the brush, you'll pull from that shadow, dipping across the forehead. Just clean the brush out, more or less, right there. Then wipe your brush and soften the underside. Then we'll take the same color and pull right through the brow. I've applied dotted lines when I did my patterning where the brow is, and we'll just pull a soft shadow. The color side is in the brow, the blend is down. Then we'll soften that on both sides. Then picking up a small brush, some of you might like to use a round detail brush for this, we'll lay the color in the crease shadow. Laying it in with a round brush, you have a little more depth of color. We will darken this with another color a little bit later. Let's soften that to the upper side. If these shadows don't look a little bit too strong to you right now, they are likely not strong enough, as they will diminish a great deal as we put color around the face and more color into the face. We're going to come back to this little curved shadow that gave the inside of the cheek, lean to the corner of the brush and pull a soft fatty crease right there. Not quite all the way across the eye, and we'll soften that just a bit. Now the other eye. And when we construct this one, we also begin constructing the nose, because this is the closed side of the face, and because of the turn of the head, we do have a more definite bridge line on her nose. So we'll start in the brow, put that one in first, then bring it right on down into the ball of the nose. This needs to lead the eye first to the ball of the nose, or you'll paint a different type nose. We'll then fill this triangle right in here. This is equivalent to this area on this eye, but it's more closed. And we'll come under and fill this triangle. On the closed side of the face, you see these triangles very distinctly. We'll do a little bit of blending. Blend this right in place. You're blending right through the nostril flare on the other side. I'll pull a little bit down just to softly hint at the dip. And take a bit more and hint at the other nostril. Always using a side-loaded brush, so you have to do very little blending. Come back to the eye now, and on the outer side of the face, we have two more triangles. Here, you need to go a little bit darker. The points of triangles are normally going to contain some of your deepest color. Reverse the brush and come under to give that little bit of cheekbone curve. At this time, she looks a little bit like she has a mask on. She's not very pretty. Faces all go through their awkward stages just like children do. Now we'll switch to the round brush and give a little stronger color in the lid crease. Come back, soften that on the top side, and then come to the under eye and suggest the fatty crease, pulling it from the same side of the eye that we did on the other side of the face. That completes the eye socket area for the first color. And we'll come down around the mouth now. And you may, and sometimes this is an interesting way to paint a face, you may just leave this side of the nostril flare to the imagination, or you can softly paint it in if you'd like. I did in this one. But it's kept very soft and with not much definition. Then we just have 3 more shadows, and you've completed the first round of shadows on the face. Those are the tucks, the corners of the mouth. Sometimes we do a little more with this. It comes all the way from the nose and shades all of this area, but this one is kept rather simple. The blush is going to do more of that construction. This softens on all sides and doesn't move really anywhere. You want to just soften it in place. Looks like she has been eating something. Got her face dirty. Then come right under the center of the lip. Turn the color inside, stroke, work out, lean to the corner and pull a little bit of a curve. Reverse the brush, stroke, walk it out, and pull a little longer around the chin curve. Now that's too strong, so I'll take the wiped brush and soften this line in place. And soften all of these others down. Some very tiny ones on the nose that are put in with the round brush. That's to do just a bit more shaping on the nose and develop a little bit of a triangle right here connecting to that shadow that we had placed earlier. Comes out on the nostril flare, comes in and curves under the ball of the nose. None of this quite touches the edge of the nose. You can see a little bit of a light line there. If you lose that light line, all you would need to do is turp your round brush, pick up light color, and add it back in, cheat it back in. I'm going to give her a little more light in this nostril flare. There we go. Wipe your round brush and just gently tap this in place. You don't have to do too much to this because it's going to be touched several times in a little bit. You can see that I've now added a third value into the face, along the hairline, in the brow line, along the bridge of the nose, along through the eye socket areas, in the ear, under the jaw. All of the shadows, all the major shadows have a third value. It is narrower or within the first value. It doesn't take up all of the area that the first shadow value did. It has been added to all of them. I will now blend just in place along the color break between the two. Now, we're going to load the brush lightly in number 5. Not a heavy load, almost a dry brush load, and begin the blush on the face. I'll start right here at the corner of the mouth on the closed or more narrow side of the face. Stroke down, pull up, and stop just short of the edge of the face. Walk it up. If you put the brush down and you obviously have too much color, stop and wipe the brush when you first begin. Now wipe the brush and then come back and blend. I won't show blending every one of them, but I'll let you see this one blending in. We'll blend under it, the outer edges, which will take it possibly to the edge of the face. Just work gently on all sides of it until it's softened in and you do not see color lines again. Once we start to blend, we'll work in all directions. But rather than blend that, I'd like to show you where all of the other areas are. We have a little bit right off the lower edge of the chin. We have a little bit resting in the edge of the shadow on the lower side of the nose. We come to this curved triangle on the neck and touch a little there. You notice I don't have as much in the brush now as I did on the cheeks. We'll put just a whisper through this area. Come, if you did not hit all of these triangles around the eye, hit just the curved blending edges. Some of those you may have already touched. Then come to the forehead, touch this curve and walk out a bit, and in a similar location on the other side of the forehead. Of course, we don't see as much of that one. Now that the blushes have been blended, we'll apply the highlights with number 4. We'll start in the forehead. I'll turn her upside down so that when I pull this curve, the brighter color in the brush is facing what will be the right when we turn her back the right way. We'll put a large curve in her forehead. You'll find that the alkyd faces will accept the highlight more readily at this time than an oil face will because it does set up more rapidly. We'll leave that one for just a moment. I'll blend all these later. We'll come then under the eye area And I'll put a curved triangle on each cheekbone. Again, the brighter color coming from the right. Then we'll slide a little bit of highlight down the bridge of the nose, close to the right-hand side. Touch a bit of shine across the tip of the nose, and then come down to the chin ball and put a little bit of highlight on the chin ball. We will now add the eyes and the mouth to the face. The eyes have a good many steps. You do not want to skimp on the eyes because they're the life of your painting, the most important part of a face painting. I've started setting up the eye by painting number 4 in the white areas of the eye. This painting is going to have blue eyes, so I will now pick up a little bit of number 8 and a touch of number 2 in my round brush. I'm sorry, number 1 in my round brush. Mix them together just to lighten the number 8 slightly. Fill in the iris pupil area of the eye. She's looking back toward us, so the iris is more of a full circle, but the top of the iris is being snipped off by the upper lid line, so it is flattened. After painting in the shape of the iris, wipe the round brush, come in and soften in the white, just one point, brush point out around the eye to take the harshness off that outer edge of the eye where it meets the white. To be careful or you might distort it a little too much. Then take straight number 8 with no light color in it, with no number 1 in it. Come back onto the actual iris, not the line that we just softened, but onto the actual iris and darken the outer edge of the iris a bit. Most eyes have a little bit darker color toward the outer edge of the iris. Then pick up number 7, which will act as our black color today, and set in the pupil. The pupil is centered in the eye, but will look much closer to the top because remember, the top of the iris is cut off. A little bit of light color there somewhere. Okay, we'll get it shaped. You may not see that very much right now, but in just a moment you will. Now I'll turp the brush, wipe it very dry on the towel, pick up some number 1 color in the brush. If a little bit of dark is still coming out of your brush, that's all right. Just wipe it and load until you get relatively clean number 1. Starting at about 1 or 2 o'clock on the eye, close to the pupil, but on the iris, stroke a stroke of this light color. Need it a bit brighter, so I'll pick up just a bit more color. Wipe the brush and soften just by tapping the outer edge of this color. Now if you lose a little bit of your dark ring there, you're in a tight area, just pick up a little bit more of the dark color, number 8. Put that back in. Okay, I want to brighten a little bit more toward the inner edge of this highlight area. So I'll brush mix 4, which is a lighter color, and 1. Get it, my brush pointed nice and pointy, and I'll come in and tap this color within that highlight closer to the inner edge or closer to the pupil. And then we'll soften a little bit again. It may or may not accept a glint at this time, but we'll see. I'll turp the brush, go into number 4, which is your highlight flesh color. Thin the paint this time with a little bit of your turp or paint thinner. Roll the brush to a fine point. And starting somewhere around 4 or 5 o'clock on the eye, push the brush down out in the iris about midway and pull up into the pupil on a diagonal slant and release pressure as you pull into the pupil. There. It did accept a highlight, the glint. Quite frequently on an oil eye you would have to wait for this for quite some time, but the alkyds do set up so that you're able to get that in. There's some shading that will come into the eye in the second painting, but we don't want to work in that inner portion of the eye at this time, so we'll put the lid lines and lashes on. We'll start on the upper lid lines and lashes with burnt umber plus a little bit of number 7. Thin the paint, roll the brush to a fine point again. We want this quite dark. And the first line that we will put down will come right along the lid line. It's actually the thickness at the base of the lashes. We'll start here at the inner corner with a little bit of a tilt upward. Need a little more turp. And then we'll pull across the eye, pushing down with a good bit of pressure, come to the outer corner and lift again. Most of the time the inclination is to make this line too fine. This is actually the thickness of the lashes. It frames the eye, so don't make this line really fine. You don't have to worry about that. Then take the color and pull the lashes. The actual lashes are going to be pulled in multiple directions, starting first pulling to the right side of the face. They do not pull up off the eye, but rather horizontally, and the ends just kick up. So we'll start about here, pull up, lift, pull up, lift. Again, these lines are not super fine. The ends of the lines need to be fine. Right about in here, we're going to begin to experience a shortening of the eyelashes because they're coming toward us. So I'll turn the piece, pull, very short, you're just seeing the tips there of the lashes, and then change directions and pull back in the other direction. You need not put 20 eyelashes on an eye. Just a few will be fine unless you make them too fine. One of those is a little bit blunt there, so I might tip it out a bit. Now I'll not complete the other eye, just paint this one eye. We do need a lower lid line though. The lower lid line is always somewhat softer, less accented than the upper lid line. We'll use our third face value, number 3 mixture, with a little umber in it. Thin it down. Start at the outer corner of the eye, not quite touching. Yes, your eye is enclosed, but if you touch these lines, it gives a very hard appearance. So you want to just not quite touch. Pull in a little bit heavier at the outer corner. I don't think you can see that. Just a moment. There we go. Release pressure toward the inner corner. Start at the outer corner here and pull in. They need not meet. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. That one needs a little work there. And we'll ease just a little of that line out where it got a little heavy there. You'll notice that this line has a high arc, comes down, almost like a sliding board, comes down, and the end kicks up. This curve on the under part of the lid does not do that. It does not come outward to meet the corners. It is narrower and enclosed within the upper lid line. You can take just a touch of paint and hint at the inner corner of the eye if you're painting a large enough face. After putting that lower lid line in, I normally take the corner of a brush and just tap it a bit to give a little softer appearance to it. The other thing that may be put on now, if you wish, are the eyebrows. You also may wait until a second painting to do this if they frighten you a little bit. I don't like for you to wait on the upper lid lines and lashes, but you can wait, and the lower either, but you can wait on the brows. We want umber and a little bit of number 7. You want to thin it down, relatively thin. Begin in the shadow and pull little lines the way that brows grow. We will let it rest for a minute, and then we will soften it just a little bit by dragging the mop through it. I've softened the brows, and we're now beginning the mouth. I have a mixture of 5 and 2 in my brush, and I've placed this at the upper edge of the upper lip line. If you want the face to have a pleasant expression, you want to lift this line a little bit. You'll then take a small dry brush and tap this color downward just to soften it into the lip a bit. The lip will thin out at the outer edges and won't have much depth at that point. Just shape her peak a little bit more accurately here. There we go. You'll notice that the lip is a bit wider from the center point to the left than it is to the right. Everything is a bit narrower on this side of the face. The second placement of this color is on the upper edge of the lower lip. We'll do a little bit of shaping there. We will not carry this color out as far. The upper lip line is the only one that will extend out as far as it does. We'll then take the little soft brush and pull this, and if you can, it's nice to pull it with a little bit of the curvature. Hint just a little bit of the curvature of the lip when you pull that down. Then we'll place the third color placement at the lower edge of the lower lip, coming here at the center and shaping the lower lip, not carrying this line all the way up. We're going to leave the lower lip open right here and right here. Again, the lip really does continue up. You really do have a lip line, but it gives a softer feeling to the face, not such a hard set look if you will leave that open. It's a little softer expression. Okay, now we'll put a little stronger color in the lip. We will use 5 and 6, which is a dark brown red, and to darken it just a bit. Applying the color in the same areas, but not quite as much. Just kind of skippy along this upper edge. The strongest color will be on the lower lip. Get a good bit of shadow in those tiny triangles. And then a bit at the very center. Take the soft brush and soften these down a bit. You may need a bit of highlight on your mouth. Use 4 and 1. Touch in on the roll of the lip with the curve, and perhaps you might need a bit at the lower edge of the upper lip, right here in the center. Let it sit for just a moment and soften slightly. Then we're ready for the hair. We're into a new area, so we'll dress it with the blending and glazing medium. Another step that is put on in this painting is the shadow over the eye. That's done with number 7. Again, put it on in the point of the round brush. Now remember, the glazing medium has been put on the entire face, the eyes included. Put it on in a round brush, number 7, come right under the eyelid, right over the painted eye. Then take a small brush, small dry brush, blend it a little bit on the lower edge. And in this particular face, I have used that same shading to curve around the corners of the white. I just pull a little bit of that around the front corner or the right-hand corner of the eye to shade the white down a little bit. Then the blouse has a little bit of overpainting on it in this stage, and that's the general highlights. Not the highlighting on the lace particularly, but the highlighting on the bow and the blouse as a whole. We're going to do that with a soft amount of number 4. Not too much. Takes less paint when you're painting in successive paintings or over paintings, because there's not really other wet color to blend into. So you'll use far less paint. You now see the highlighting of the major areas of the blouse completed. I would like to show you on an enlargement down here a little bit of the ruffle detailing. I'll take an angle brush, load it in a little bit of the cream color, number 4, and this is the stage that the ruffle is now. I'll use the brush in an upright position, start back at this portion of the ruffle, which would be equivalent to the portion going around her neck, and come forward a little bit at a time, constructing first the back side of each ruffle and then the front side. And then starting there, pulling this back side, and then the front side, progressing through the ruffle, adding a little bit of light. Then take a round brush and number 4, which has been thinned a little bit to a thinner consistency, and we'll put the suggestion of a lace edge on this ruffle. In painting, we use a lot of special effects, what I like to call special effects, things that look and add a bit of detail but really aren't difficult. They might take a little bit of extra time, but they aren't difficult to do. So we'll take this little bit of thinned paint on the point of a round brush and just lightly drizzle a very loose edge, picking up a little more paint than you normally would. Very, very loose now. Drizzle that little suggestion of lace edging. This is also added at the lower edge of each of the ties. Right up in here, we'll do something very similar. The only other step added in this painting to the blouse, I won't complete the other tie, is to take a little bit of the dark color, thin, on the round brush, very thin, liner brush consistency, or fine line work. Roll the brush on a paper towel, across the paper towel so you don't have much, and add the little bit of texture or shearing that's in just the tie and collar. Turning the piece sideways so that you can cut these lines more horizontally. It's a little bit easier that way. Don't be worried if they hop and skip. We're just trying to suggest. We're not trying to draw every little line. You will also do that on the bow itself, and these lines would run this way in the bow. I now have the completed portrait in front of me with the third painting, the third overpainting done. And I'd like to just talk with you about the things that are done in this painting. Let's begin with the hair. I'm only adding line work to the hair in this painting. So I did not use the blending and glazing medium. Only if you're trying to blend something in do you need to apply that. But I did add line work to loosen the hair and to accent the feeling of the flow and the highlight areas. The first color that I used was burnt umber plus number 7, the darker color. And it's used mostly to loosen, you can see a little bit, to loosen out of the blocked in feeling of the hair on the face or on the outer edges. You may feel that you need a little of it through the major flow areas of the hair, but the majority of it is around the edges. Then I went to raw sienna plus a little bit of cream color, or number 4, to accent the highlight. The warm highlight areas were accented with lines of this. Then the cooler areas were accented very lightly with a mixture of number 1 plus number 8, making a cool blue highlight for the low lights in the hair. Let that rest a moment after you've lined it, and then mop it. Just long enough for the terp to evaporate off the surface, and then mop it very lightly. In the face, if you have all of the other parts of the face, as much blush, as much highlight as you want, there's only one additional step in this particular painting, and that's to glaze all of the shadows in the finished face with a mixture of number 8 and to number 1. All of us have blue, green, or purple shading in the low areas of our face, so it cools and softens it down quite a bit. Takes some of the red out and makes it a little more natural. You use it in all of the shadowed areas and also softly on the outer areas of the face and jaw, right through here. In the blouse, the only addition would be to take your highlight and accent softly around the dark areas of the lace that we applied in the painting previously. After it rests just for a moment, you use the number 4 for that, and after you let the terp evaporate out, you soften that out. And then, except for finishing little things that you might want to change or little bits of overpainting here and there, you're done with your painting. On this surface, I have shown the amount of pattern, if you're indeed going to pattern anything at all, that you should apply to your piece for the stroke rose design. It would be better if you would just start from scratch with no pattern. We'll start the roses with a bright brush. A bright, if you remember back to the early part of the tape today, is a short-haired flat, and is a better choice for the first steps of the roses because it will resist the surface better when used in a perpendicular manner. We'll begin at the top of the rose. I have a side load of my blush color, which is number 5. It doesn't matter if a little of this color is all over your brush, but you would like for it to be heavier in one side. I'll start at the top of the rose, stand the brush up, come down in the center with a little bit of a V or a pinched U, really. Walk the color up and fluff out or fan the back out slightly. Then I'll put the brush in basically the same position, come down a brush width, and pull a shape that echoes the first for the front of the bowl. Then we'll place the brush high at the back, right as this color is stopping where we fanned it out. Close the brush to what you have done. This would be an open brush. This is a closed brush. And do a couple of little short pushes, one on this side and one on this side. Little short, fluffy strokes. Turn your work slightly. Come in right under this, again as closed as possible to what you've just done, and make a longer pushed stroke that ends on a chisel, pushing down so that it's fluffy and hesitating and breaking the stroke so that it's fluffy rather than a smooth stroke. Do again one on this side and one on this side. Then turn the piece so that the front petal faces you so that you can pull toward yourself. Stand the brush on its chisel, touch, push, push, and then come back to a touch. That's the rough sketch of the little rose. The next step is to apply shading to the little rose. You'll load number 6 into a brush a little more narrowly than the first color, but basically repeat the steps. You begin in the center again with a smaller version of what you did in the center. A little more color here. You'll fluff a few layers across the back, come to the front and shade the lower side of the bowl. Then up to the sides for those short little strokes. Sometimes the students think they call those the ears of the rose. The high little short strokes. And then following on around the rose, you'll add the darker color in the same order and the same location, just more narrowly. All of the background has now been applied and softened out. I now take an angle brush. You want a brush that's an appropriate size for your leaves. Since this is larger, I have a 3/8 inch angle. You might want a 1/4 or even an 1/8 inch angle if you're doing small roses. And load it in number 8. And we'll come in and begin to place leaves. They will just barely show in the background, and in some of the darker areas we'll have to use a lighter color. We'll start out at the tip of the leaf, walk back around one side, at the tip again, and walk back around the other side. These are just little suggestions of leaves. We'll do many of them in this dark color. Then we will use the number 8 plus some Naples yellow when we want a lighter leaf. Let me place a little bit lighter one for you. Out on the edges here, be a little softer, more subdued. And you may even add a little bit of number 4 to that mixture. Be number 8, Naples yellow, and number 4 to put in a very light one in a dark area that will just barely show as a shadow leaf. After all the leaves are applied, you will take a small mop and soften the color to the inside of the leaf. The inside of the leaf, the majority of that area is just background color. I've now added a few more leaves to fill in the cluster. I'll take a little bit of the number 8 color side-loaded on the same brush that I painted the leaves with, and just do a little shading along the upper curve of the vein of a few of the major leaves. I won't do too many of these right now. I'll softly blend this out a little bit and then take a little bit of number 4 and number 8 and put a foggy highlight. We're not picking up any real strong bright greens in this. It would not go well or fit within the range of colors that we're using in this project, but the colors that we're using will say leaf very nicely. Now we're ready to highlight our rose. I've taken number 4 and added a little bit of number 4 and added a little bit of number 5 to it to make a light pink. We will want to thin the consistency of this paint a little bit, so I'm going to dip my knife in the turp or paint thinner, pick up a little at a time and thin this down. It needs to be a little lighter in consistency. I'm not getting enough here. We'll start with an angle brush again. Load it lightly in your base pink, number 4. Wipe it. Then take the point and touch this lighter paint. Come over to another spot on the palette and load it into the brush, but we're not trying to blend quite as much of that edge away as we normally would in a side load. We want to keep a little bit of that light edge. Then come to your roses and start at the back of the rose and fluff this little bit of light across the back of the rose and softly down into the center. Then come in and hit the front of the bowl with a little soft highlight. Again, making short, hesitant strokes. Then up to the sides where we started those next short strokes. And with this stroke, you'll begin to see some things appear on the rose that were not in the rough sketch of the rose. We'll start here and we'll cut across the front and have an edge of a petal that was not there before. I'm going to switch to a little bit smaller brush. It seems a little large for my highlighting. A little bit smaller angle brush. An angle brush does this naturally for you. Get this one in. These can tag over into the background a little bit and even pick up a little of the green hue underneath. And we'll come to these front petals right here. Hesitating and chopping your stroke will give you some nice little tears and ruffles in your petals. We'll turn again so that this one can pull toward us. The strokes on this piece are done in a mixture of number 8 and number 1, a medium blue-green mix, staying a little to the dark side, picking up the color of the base coat background and going a little bit darker with it. You'll thin on the point of your round brush, small round, or a liner will do, but nothing too very long and thin. You'll stand the brush straight up and down, perpendicular to the surface, pull toward you, and sit down on the end of the stroke. Pull toward you and sit down. I've enjoyed painting with you today and hope that you have enjoyed this as well. I'll look forward to next time. Thank you.
Write the Calico Addict for a current seminar schedule and complete catalog of books, packets, wood, and specialty items. This video is sponsored in part by Winsor & Newton.
The world of art today is a far cry from the time when painting was almost entirely restricted to master craftsmen working in their studios. During the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, an artist's paints were prepared in his studio by apprentices who would grind and mix the pigments, working from recipes and methods handed down from master painter to pupil. It was not until the middle of the 17th century that the separate trade of artists' colormen began to emerge. A successful colorman needed to have the skill of a scientist as well as the knowledge of the needs of an artist. William Winsor, an artist with a scientific background, and Henry Newton, a watercolorist, combined their talents to create in 1832 the company whose name remains synonymous with the finest art materials, Winsor & Newton. In manufacturing the finest quality paints, great care is taken in selecting those pigments which are proven to give the purest, most stable and long-lasting colors. There is no room for compromise, even when pigments are difficult or expensive to obtain. Each color requires its own particular recipe. Therefore, many colormen kept their formulations a closely guarded secret until 1892, when Winsor & Newton became the first to have the confidence to publish the composition and permanence ratings of their colors. Over the years, Winsor & Newton expanded and now produce a full range of fine art materials. No better brush can be found anywhere. Each one crafted and assembled using the same techniques passed down from one generation of brushmaker to the next. For over 150 years, Winsor & Newton has led the world in research and development of all types of artists' materials, brushes, pigments, and more. The foremost, the finest, Winsor & Newton Artists' Materials.